The troublesome trucks are heading for the new station, and they're going too fast. I must warn the station master.
This is where the fun begins.
Thomas Saves the Day from Season 8 is a gem. Today starts a brand new series for this channel where I take a look at hit era episodes that I think are hidden gems. Now, Thomas Saves the Day comes from Season 8, and it's one of the episodes that I grew up on. I'm very nostalgic for this episode, and so it's definitely going to play a role.
Luckily, no one was hurt.
So without further ado, let's get right into this episode. First off, I love that the episode just focuses on Thomas. I like that we don't get many sets in this episode, and it feels very separate from the other engines and the main parts of Sodor. I like when the episodes have a smaller scale, and so we really get to focus on what is happening, and that is Thomas battling the difficult bend. Now, you may say Thomas being afraid of a difficult bend is out of character, and while I can't necessarily disagree, I do think it's possible that all the engines on the island can have issues and can be annoyed and have troubles with parts of the track. What really makes this okay for me is just how the rest of the episode goes. If the rest of the episode was very poorly done, then I would for sure have a problem with this. And for me personally, even though some of the sets are very lackluster, it's easier not to have a problem with them because the episode is so small in scale. The episode doesn't try to do too much, and so it just ends up being a nice, fun sequence of events. And for some reason, I really enjoy Michael Brandon in this episode. Even though I said Michael Brandon doesn't have a voice for Thomas and Friends, for some reason he just sounds good to me in this episode. But real quick, how do we feel about the voice he does for Harvey?
You are a really useful engine, said Harvey, and a jolly good friend.
At least you try, Michael. It may be hypocritical, but opinions can change over time, and as I rewatch some of these episodes, he's obviously going to have some good performances. Is he better than Alec Baldwin or George Carlin or Michael Angelis? No, but he does have good moments.
Suddenly, Thomas saw a line of troublesome trucks rushing towards him. They had come uncoupled from Edward.
He's so relaxed while doing this episode, and he's not trying to do too much like he was in Season 7, and that's why I think it works for me. But the plot is simple. The workmen are building Kelsthorpe Station, and Thomas is in charge of transporting them back and forth. So let's see what happens.
Thomas said goodbye to Annie and Clarabelle. I don't know how I'll manage the difficult bend without you.
And to be honest, this is the only problem I have with this episode. I just feel like Thomas is too reliant on Annie and Clarabelle here. It kind of feels like the issues that people have with Twin Trouble, and how Donald and Douglas are way too reliant on each other in that episode. But for me, it's just something that I can get past. And because Annie and Clarabelle are at the works, we get this good scene here.
The coaches rolled along the line and bumped into James. Watch what you're doing, James snorted.
I just love how quiet this scene at the sheds is. We don't need to hear anything from the other engines.
The next day, Thomas puffed to the coach yard.
And then I'm not going to lie, this scene is a pretty good one. And it would be so much better if they didn't use slow motion.
And soon it was.
But pretty much for this entire episode, Thomas has been miserable, and I'm here for it. I kind of feel bad for him in this episode, to be honest.
Luckily, no one was hurt. But Thomas felt sadder than ever.
To be honest, I just enjoy Thomas being miserable in this episode, and it makes the ending so much better.
I can't go around the difficult bend, Thomas wheezed sadly. I'm not a useful engine without Annie and Clarabelle.
Okay, that's a bit much, I will admit it. But then we get a nice scene of Harvey puffing away with the Red Branch Line coaches in tow. I just love how quiet and sad this episode is. I don't know why, I just love the vibe of it.
Thomas trundled slowly back to Tidmouth's sheds. He wanted to be back with Annie and Clarabelle.
And then we have a classic runaway. Now it's kind of funny that this train has no brake van and it just broke away from Edward. Sometimes things just happen on Sodor, but the train having no brake van is pretty funny to me.
Suddenly, Thomas saw a line of troublesome trucks rushing towards him. They had come uncoupled from Edward.
And this scene was my favorite as a kid.
Cinders and ashes, cried Thomas. The troublesome trucks are heading for the new station, and they're going too fast.
I remember reenacting this episode with my Thomas Wooden Railway items and just having an absolute blast recreating the difficult bend. But Thomas redeems himself on the difficult bend using Annie and Clarabelle's advice, learning from his mistakes.
I've done it, he tooted. But so did the runaway trucks.
With the station being in danger, Thomas warns the signalman.
The signalman quickly changed the points.
Whoa, why are we reusing footage again?
The troublesome trucks hurtled into a siding. They biffed and bashed the buffers.
This crash would have been so good if it wasn't in slow motion. Even so, I still love it. And I love the choice of rolling stock that they used for this runaway. And Michael Brandon's narration was actually good here.
They biffed and bashed the buffers.
The crash and the runaway are just very satisfying sequences, from Thomas warning the signalman.
And he raced into the station just in time.
And you know this guy was asleep on the job until Thomas came.
Runaway trucks are coming, he cried. You must change the points.
Well, who would have thought of that? Thanks, Thomas. You just saved me from getting fired by the fat hat. Anyways, where was I? Oh, yes. And to the very underrated crash.
They biffed and bashed the buffers.
And so, yeah, Thomas saves the day. Get it? This episode keeps things simple, has a small scope, uses a very small amount of characters, basically only Thomas, yet it keeps me entertained the entire time. And I should have said this earlier, but this episode starts out very quickly. We don't get a boring scene at Tidmouth Sheds, we just get right into the story. To me, this episode can even fit in with the classic series, but with two changes. Make Thomas less reliant on Annie and Clarabelle, and instead of having him so sad, why not have him be angry and very hot-headed about not being able to get through the difficult bend? The idea of the difficult bend would still be kind of silly, but then at least it would be more entertaining with Thomas being very angry and pissed off that he can't get through it. Because we all love hot-headed Thomas from season 1 now. But even so, I just love how sad this episode feels. And if the crashes weren't in slow motion, but like I said, this episode is still a gem. I just thoroughly enjoy watching this episode, and I can't wait to cover more episodes in future videos. But let me know what you guys think about this episode in the comment section below. It's certainly a childhood favorite for me. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.